Based on what you guys have been doing for learning work the last 2 days, these are some questions you should now be able to answer. Why did the stock market crash? What happened to the banks specifically after the crash happened? What happened to people's monies in those banks? And then ultimately, what were the causes and effects of the Great Depression? For your reading about the Great Depression, these are the questions you needed to focus on for your learning work. So, as far as how banks were affected, they had invested a lot of money in the stock market. And as you guys know, it wasn't the bank's money, it was the people's money who had deposited it in the bank. And so when the banks lost the money in the stock market, they were actually losing people's money. And so a lot of banks had to close because they did not have the funds anymore and they couldn't pay back what they owed. As far as what caused the Great Depression, there were many factors that were involved with it. Obviously, the first one is that the stock market crashed, which then led to bank failures, and businesses were closing because they had made so many goods that they could no longer sell, and so they didn't have enough money saved up to last, and so a lot of businesses went out of business. A lot of the foreign countries that owed us money also were suffering because the United States was suffering, and so they couldn't pay back the loans that they owed to the United States, so that was affecting our economy. And then on top of that, when we tried to sell our stuff to other countries, they made us pay such high taxes to sell in their country that we weren't making a profit. So that's what this high foreign tariffs refers to. As far as things that happened as a result of the crash and the Great Depression, people lost their jobs, their homes, their life savings. A lot of people couldn't buy food. Families broke apart because people would look for work or would just leave because they couldn't provide and felt ashamed. Some families put their children in orphanages because they couldn't feed them, and they knew that in an orphanage at least their children would get food and not starve to death. Some people who felt responsible or desperate by what had happened committed suicide. And overall, a lot of people took less pay doing the same jobs they'd done before the Great Depression, but at least they got to keep their job and keep some money coming in, even if it was less. As far as Hoovervilles, this is an example of a Hooverville. Basically, there were towns for homeless people, and they would build their houses or shacks, as they were called, out of anything they could find, any scraps. So we're talking wood, tin, tar paper, cardboard was kind of what tar paper was. They didn't have running water. There weren't any bathrooms. And if you don't have any running water, obviously that leads to unsanitary conditions, not being able to wash up. Heat was basically burning barrels. So they had a big metal barrel that they would throw whatever they could light on fire in, and you could go stand by it for heat, or something very similar in their shacks as well. They were called Hoovervilles because Hoover was president at the time, and they were blaming President Hoover for the condition of the economy in the United States. Hoover did try to fix the situation. He started something called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, or RFC for short, which basically gave loans to banks, railroads, and other big businesses, because he thought, hey, if we can keep these businesses going, they're going to hire people, and then those people will get paid. And so he thought it would basically have this big effect. However, it took too long. First of all, you had to get the businesses going, and then you had to hire the people. And then after they worked, then you would pay them. And so we're talking weeks before people will get paid, and people needed money now. He so then pushed loan money to states who didn't have the money to help the people in their community that really needed it, and also to finance a variety of public works projects. However, by the time he actually did this, it was too late, and people did not want him to be president anymore. And so he did not win the next election. As far as has the stock market crashed since 1929, it has gone down. Not to the same severity as it did in 1929. There were many things put into place so that it would not have the same effect if it ever did happen again. So banks, which you're going to find out a little bit in today's learning work, now have insurance. And so if people put their savings in banks, they're now guaranteed to get it back. So never again would people lose their life savings like they did in 1929. There are also some other factors you can have here that we'll talk about in class on Thursday. Just so you guys have some other visuals, this is another example of a Hooverville. So these are little shacks set up next to an apartment building. You can see that this person used like picture frames as part of the side of their house. Sometimes they had quote unquote tent cities where people would just put up tents. And you can see that these are signs that kind of are implying that Hoover's to blame. Hard times are still hoovering over us. Hoover's Poor Farm Tobacco Fund. So basically these are kids that are pretty hard off, and they're showing who they hold responsible for this. Here's one of the propaganda posters that was put out. If you like the Depression and want more, vote for Hoover. So people were very upset with Hoover at the time. This is kind of a far out picture of a Hooverville. Hoovervilles were built on public land, and so if a city wanted the Hooverville gone, they could send in the police to clear out the Hooverville and destroy anything that was in that public location. So even though they had a temporary house, it wasn't a guarantee that it would always be there either. One more example that I can show you of propaganda for Hoover is this clip right here, where the debt is up here, and that's represented by the United States and how much debt we were in. And his plan was to build this Hoover Dam to provide jobs and help boost the economy. And so it's kind of a pun on whether this dam was fiscal sanity, like was this the smart thing to do for our debt to help manage it. This is an image of Herbert Hoover at the time. And as you guys all heard previously, after the Great Depression and his lack of ability, quote unquote, to get us out of the Great Depression, he was not reelected and FDR became president. His first thing as president was to try to restore hope for people in the economy. And so he had some emergency things that he did, but he also set up a bunch of programs called the New Deal. So today you are going to start looking at how the New Deals changed the U.S. government. So for today's learning work, you can see in today's folder, Wednesday 310, it was a plan to basically fix the Great Depression with using the New Deal. So you're going to open up this reading for 28.5, which is readings on the New Deal. So I'm going to add New Deal reading to this. And then you're going to open up these set of questions right here. Okay, the reading section, you'll see another picture of FDR here, goes right in order. So when you guys are reading about the New Deals, you're going to be focusing on how did they help the economy, and they go right in order. Okay, so the Federal Emergency Relief Act is right here. Okay, the Civilian Conservation Corps is right here. The Works Progress Administration is right here. Okay. The Social Security Act is right here. The National Recovery Administration is right here. The Tennessee Valley Authority is right here. Okay. Then we go to the agriculture one. Okay. And the AAA is right here. So the Agricultural Adjustment Administration. All these fun words, right? Okay. And then here's the stuff that we talked about as far as the bank. The FDIC is right here, and the SEC is right here. Okay. So as you're reading through this, you're going to be focusing on how these programs helped or attempted to help people. So that's what you're going to fill in this box. So you're going to read about what the Federal Emergency Relief Act was. Then you're going to explain how did it attempt to help people. And then you're going to read about the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, and you're going to write down what did they do to attempt to help people, okay? And then WPA, okay? And then Social Security Act. And then you go back up to the top and it'll be Tennessee Valley Authority, Agricultural Adjustment Administration, Soil Conservation Service, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And actually, some of these New Deal programs actually were used in Minnesota as well. And there's actually several things in Minnesota that were created by the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps. So you can look that up if that is something that interests you. I will mention one or two in class. So for class on Thursday, you need to read about the New Deals, including President Roosevelt's first emergency kind of plan to help people feel confident in his leadership abilities and in the economy again. And then you're going to read about each of these New Deals and tell me how did they attempt to help people during this time period in United States history. As always, if you have questions, you can drop in on my office hour, or you can send me a message via the Schoology, or talk to me during class.